he sees the industry and from an angle we don't all see at when he's defending cannabis users, and he wants to tell us what's going to happen when if the MPP's initiative passes, and what we can expect.
Well, sure. Thanks, Dave. I can tell you that as a criminal defense lawyer for 22 years now, most of that time spent defending cannabis users, people involved in the cannabis industry, which up until very recently has been all black market. But one thing that I noticed is clearly when the MPP's medical initiative passed, we had an increase in marijuana interdiction, especially in Maricopa County, but statewide as well. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that whenever there's limits that are set, whenever there's something that
we have each other around. Talk this way.
Okay. Yeah. Whenever there's something that legitimizes activity, like for example medical marijuana, what happens is that it stops becoming criminal in the minds of people. It no longer is criminal. It's no longer a dangerous thing. It's now an accepted medicine. It's legitimate. It's no longer to be demonized and ridiculed. And what that does quite naturally is it creates amongst consumers an attitude that, hey man, we're past this reefer madness era that we've all had to suffer through for so many decades, and we finally now have moved on to a better place, a place that is, reflects the truth, that this is a relatively, or if not completely harmless substance, plant, and with a lot of real medicinal value. Well, okay, problem being is that when that truth settles in and that attitude stops going from I have to hide from the law to it's okay now, leads to some behavior or that the government would still like to consider to be criminal. For example, growing marijuana. If someone's allowed to use marijuana, possess marijuana, it's expensive to buy marijuana at a dispensary. Well, quite naturally they think, I can grow it myself, I'll just grow it myself, just like one might do with tomatoes or any other product that they want to consume that's expensive to buy that they could make cheaper or better. Or there's amongst other adults, in this case, when sticking with medical marijuana patients, who might think, well, you're out of medicine? Yeah, you can't afford to buy medicine at a dispensary. Look, I've got some extra. I'd be happy, just pay me what I paid for it and you can have some of my medicine. Unfortunately, both of those activities are still felonies punishable by imprisonment in the state of Arizona, as innocent and as harmless as they may be. If this recreational use initiative that MPP has filed, unfortunately, goes only far enough to make everyone comfortable enough to end up putting themselves in prison. Because what will happen is with a strict limit. Let me explain something to you. You grow 6 plants under the medical marijuana initiative. I'm sorry. The MPP's initiative, 2016 initiative. You grow 6 plants, and you're a law-abiding model citizen. No problem. But if for some reason you end up growing a 7th plant, that's not like an administrative fine. What that means is that likely the combined weight of those 7 plants will exceed 2 pounds, which in Arizona is the threshold amount, and mean that that person now is facing mandatory imprisonment. Mandatory imprisonment. For what? Growing 7 plants instead of 6? Or that person who was willing to share some of his or her marijuana with another adult consumer who's also legally allowed to possess and use marijuana under the MPP's Legalization initiative. If that person accepted anything of value in exchange for that marijuana, that's, again, a felony charge. And that person could be facing imprisonment. Not necessarily mandatory imprisonment, but certainly felony prosecution. So this is why we all of the consumer allied groups that formed a coalition months ago, the Arizona Cannabis Consumer Coalition, of many groups like Safer Arizona, Normal, Camp 420, CannaSense, Phoenix Cannabis Coalition, Yavapai Cannabis Coalition, Students for a Sensible Drug Policy, and other groups all came together and said to MPP, this is our bottom line. If you don't include these provisions, which would, what we were asking for was that these like growing 7 plants or engaging in a very small hand-to-hand transaction, that those would be defelonized and still not legal. If you don't have a license, you shouldn't sell, but you shouldn't have to go to prison. And if you're allowed to grow 6 plants, you shouldn't grow a 7th one, but if you do, you shouldn't have to go to prison. That's all we're saying. That it should be a fine. Okay? MPP's initiative will only serve to encourage the prosecution of individuals who engage in that activity. So the net human misery that the MPP's initiative will cause will far exceed the amount of benefit or relief that it's going to provide to people who choose to possess or use, an ounce of marijuana. In other words, prison beds will be, more prisons will have to be built. More prisons will have to be built, okay? More prisons, not less prisons. Now, when I came to this many years ago, to this, I was legal director at Normal back in the 90s there in Washington, D.C., and been a 20-year member of the Normal Legal Committee now. My idea of when you legalize marijuana for recreational, I thought the point was so that we no longer put people in prison and no longer took their houses and their children away. That's what I thought that was supposed to be all about. But then I found out, though, from the Marijuana Policy Project that that's a nice idea in theory, but really what we need to do is create a corporation first program where consumer rights and protections are the afterthought, not the primary reason for the initiative. The MPP's initiative will allow a handful of people to become extremely wealthy. There's no question about that. But what it won't do is alleviate the suffering that marijuana consumers have been enduring now for over half a century. And this new initiative, the People's Initiative, that we're here talking about today, does. And it may not yet be as well funded. And we may have a road ahead of us to get it on the ballot and then to get it passed, and to get it passed with more votes than MPP's initiative if both of them passed. But here's the bottom line. If we do get this thing passed, it's going to change the world, okay? When we do get this passed, it's going to change the world. Not just in Arizona, but everywhere around the United States, to say you don't have to go along with the big corporation top-down model, man. You can do this the right way from the grassroots up. And secondly, if all we end up doing, okay, and I hope we get this passed, but the truth of it is, if all we end up doing is derailing the MPP's initiative, we will have prevented a lot of suffering and a lot of people being And so, however it ends up, it's right. This is the initiative to support, and I would, if I invited the MPP to come back to the table and sit down when Jason first filed this initiative on multiple occasions in social media and so forth, and never got a nibble of anything. I said, let me try to mediate. Look, there is a split in the dispensaries amongst the MPP's group, and they came right back to the table and negotiated with those dispensaries and reached a compromise. I thought, well, look, you've got a split. Now the consumers aren't happy with your initiative. Come back to the table and put these important provisions that because when we asked them, why won't you defelonize the small sales of marijuana. Why won't you do it? Their answer to us was this: we don't have a good answer for you. It's just the way it is, and it's not going to change. So let's get past it and let's move forward. That's what we were told. Rob Campia came to town from Washington, D.C. And I said to Rob at the gala event in Scottsdale that was held after they filed their initiative. I attended that, and so I figured I'd ask Rob Campia himself, because maybe there's a good reason. He had said he was satisfied that everybody, all the stakeholders, meaning, I guess consumers, dispensaries, the
I'm a
MPP,
stakeholder, I'm a citizen.
whoever are the stakeholders, we're all 90% satisfied with the MPP's initiative. And I knew that that wasn't true, not amongst consumers, not among the people that this initiative is supposed to be benefiting. So I asked him, I said, Rob, there are a lot of people, consumers, who would like to feel 90% satisfied with your initiative. But the problem is, and I went through this whole thing that I just talked to you about it was a long question. Why won't you defelonize? What's the reason? Sentencing reform is supported by voters around the country and in Arizona. Stop putting nonviolent drug offenders behind bars, especially marijuana violators behind bars. This is something that resonates with the voters right now. This wouldn't hurt the initiative. It wouldn't take votes away from it. So I asked him, I said, why won't you do that? And he literally didn't give me an answer. Ryan Hurley, who's a lawyer here in town, and I consider Ryan to be a friend of mine. I talked to him, and I disagree that he's supporting MPP, but he answered for Rob Campia, and it was just kind of a misdirection. It was a non-responsive answer. And so again, no answer, man. At least give us an answer. Tell us you took a poll and the voters just did not want defelonization. Okay, give me something, something real that I can say, okay, there's a real reason why we can't, but there isn't any, except for read between the lines. Read between the lines. Who doesn't want people to sell marijuana hand to hand? Who stands to lose from that? And who would like it to remain a felony imprisonment offense to dare
Federal government.
and government and the dispensaries, the government and the dispensaries.
Commercial prison.
So we have what's called in this country the prison industrial complex. The prison industrial complex. It's huge. It's monstrous. If there are people who have a direct interest in keeping marijuana offenses felonies, then doesn't that make them now part of the prison industrial complex?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I'm not going to support people that are part of the prison industrial complex. I'm going to stand up for the truth, and I'm going to stand up for what's right. And so I ask everybody to look very closely at this initiative and support it as well. So that's what I have to say. And if any of you guys have any questions, I know that Jason's already told you a lot. We're working on some fine-tuning, strengthening language in this initiative, including new things, like, for example, something that's real important to me and real important to this gentleman right here, Dennis, is post-conviction relief. That wasn't in the first draft, but Jason's absolutely going to make sure that it gets in. We met about it. Yeah, it's already ready to be refiled. It's going to be in the new version. That means people who are in prison now, who wouldn't be in prison under the new law, can get out.
Yeah.
And that right there is worth the whole initiative, just to see that people be able to walk out of the iron gates of prison. And there's a lot of other good stuff. It's going to make this second filing even better. And we're working really hard to get that done as soon as possible.